Okay, so we're off and running with part two of my third attempt to record. Maybe it's better that we make shorter videos. It's probably better for you. So I wanted to jump back to the CTL to look at things coming up before we continue tonight. So you can see that we have the next three sessions up on the board. April 7th, which I understand we will be in the library across the street from Suseonggu on the fourth floor in the culture and education lab, classroom, whatever. I can't remember the name, but I've been there before, so I know where it is. And so the assignment is to read this article. It's 2 pages. And consider his points. Do you agree with him? Do you disagree with him? What are some counter arguments? What is his key concern? Do you know who this guy is, Jeffrey Sachs? He is famous. Why is he famous? Why do I have interesting, okay. And so the article is attached as a PDF, and it's also available from this university website. The original website, Project Syndicate, is a subscription. You have to pay to see stuff. So we have this other version. Yeah, I guess it's kind of legal. Not quite sure. Then we skip a week. I'm not teaching. And then the 21st, we'll talk about an article from Ja that talks about East Asia. Unfortunately, this article doesn't convert to OCR. It's going to be harder to read. So I've underlined the main points. Do the best you can. I know it's going to be hard. It doesn't transfer. And then the 28th will be our midterm test. And we'll talk about it, and we can negotiate a little bit. What kind of thing do you want to do on your test? Do you want to have a sit in the classroom paper test? Do you want to have one-to-one interview test? That's a lot harder for me. Do you want a take-home test? I think that you're graduate students and you have the right to negotiate your test. As a class, we'll decide what's the best way to test. Yeah, there has to be a test. Sorry, I am a believer that we have to test, and there's reasons. One is it's motivation for you to study. 2 is it lets me know if I'm teaching well. So yeah, there'll be a test on the 28th. All right, that's enough of that. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. Let's talk about Japan's reluctant globalization. Now, when we talk about any paper, we should always consider the environment of a paper. For example, we can look at the publication date. When was it published? This is an interesting case because we're reading a book review about a book. So journals and things like that, they usually take a year or so to publish. So we can guess that probably this book review was written in 2004. The book was published in 2003, but it usually takes 2 or 3 years from book writing to book publishing before you can buy the book. That means the book was probably written in the year 2000, 20 years ago. So some information will be different. Things have changed. We also want to think about any possible bias. We're very much aware of author bias now because we have recently seen the case where somebody, a professor at Harvard University, wrote a paper about comfort women. And many people are upset because they think it is too much pro-Japanese. And they looked at the writer and they said, he lived in Japan. He studied in Japan. He worked in Japan. And now he's working at Harvard, but his job is funded by a grant from a Japanese company. He must be too pro-Japanese. He must be biased in favor of Japanese. So we can look at things like the author's history, other things he's written. We can also look at the publication itself. What do we know about this book or this magazine or this journal? And for example, this book review is written in HNet. Now we'll go back to the website so I can show you something about HNet. No, I'm sorry, it's not there, it's in the PDF. In the PDF article, whoa, what happened there? Sometimes these things get goofy. In the PDF article, there is a link. And if you click on the link, it takes you to the review. HNet. HNet, Humanities and Social Sciences Online. It is a discussion group where you can write papers for other people to read, and people can discuss these things. So it's kind of like a journal, kind of like a bulletin board, kind of like a, I won't say chat room, it's more formal, but it's very much like a journal but more interactive. If you can remember Yahoo groups, it's kind of sort of something like that. All right, anyway, this web page is also available in a printable version, which is a little bit easier to read, and it's what I have given you. So let's reduce that. What we have here is from that website. So the original author of the book is Ulrich Schade and William Grimes, published by M.E. Sharp, that is a U.S. publisher, in 2003, and you can see how many pages. It's reviewed by Brian McVeigh. Now, I don't know Brian McVeigh. I haven't researched who is Brian McVeigh. I also haven't researched who is Ulrich Schade or William Grimes. But if I thought something might be biased, then I would want to try to find out more about these guys. All right, the article, Japan's Reluctant Globalization. Okay, reluctant means I don't really want to. I prefer no. Do I have to? Can we do different? So, we've got this globalization, but maybe I don't really want it. In this book, they don't really talk about what is globalization, but instead they're going to talk about how is globalization doing in Japan. And this reviewer starts off, like many book reviews, by going from kind of A to Z in the book. We'll start in the beginning, we'll talk about important things as it goes until we get to the end of the book. And then later, we'll do something different. So we start with the beginning. And he says, starting with the famed Chrysanthemum and Sword description. Okay, Chrysanthemum and Sword. I'm sure you know that the chrysanthemum is the national flower of Japan. You probably also know that a chrysanthemum is a very delicate flower. You blow on it or you shake it and it can fall apart. It gives the idea of beautiful and delicate and so careful and so nice. And the sword is kind of the opposite. The sword, the samurai, I'll kill you, I'll cut you up, I'm not kind, I'm not gentle. So it says, starting with this kind of description, Japan seems to invite portrayals. The situation of Japan seems like everybody wants to make some kind of picture, some kind of image, some kind of description. that attempt to capture contradictory or ostensibly conflicting trends. Okay, so these images we give of Japan, like the Chrysanthemum and the Sword, they're designed to help us see a contradiction, a conflict. It says ostensibly. That means seems to be, looks like, people say that it is, conflicting trends. This reviewer doesn't say that it really is conflicting or contradictory. He says, but it seems the descriptions that we give, the images we give for Japan, seem to sound like conflict. He says that the political system in Japan has been described as patterned pluralism. Okay, pluralism, more than one. Okay, one dog, two dogs, D-O-G-S is the plural form, more than one. Pattern pluralism sounds like designed. We design more than one type. Or compartmentalized pluralism. Compartmentalized, everything has its place, put everything in its place. 정리해, right? Put everything in its place. And one also as bureaucratic-led mass inclusion. I don't know what that means. We don't care. The economy is said to have guided markets and managed competition. Okay, market is the idea that anybody, anyone, any company can go out and compete. I have a good idea. I make it. I sell it. If people like it, they buy it. I'm a winner. If they don't like it, I'm a loser. Okay, managed competition. By the way, my computer's acting weird right now. There's a black backdrop. It's not supposed to be. Whatever. So we have these guided markets. That means somebody is controlling it or at least pushing it in a certain way. It's not a free market. It doesn't do anything it wants. We're going to kind of encourage it to go this way. In the same way, managed competition. That is, there's somebody up above who's controlling the competition a little bit, making sure that it doesn't get too hot or doesn't get too cold. We'll support it. We'll push it. Okay? It is a nation where corporate concerns trump politics. Japan Inc. Now, Trump here doesn't mean Donald Trump. Trump here is like when we play cards and you've got a king and I've got a 9 and she's got a 6. Well, my 9 trumps her 6. It's worth more points. But your king trumps my 9. The king is worth more points, like 13. So to trump means to win, to be more important. So corporate concerns, worries about the corporation, about business, are more important than politics. So we call it Japan Inc. All right, more blah, blah, blah. Don't really care, but it says, is Japan really changing? Is another concern, a fixation. I have to, my only thing I worry about, I'm fixated on this idea. Is Japan really changing? All right. So what? Skip. Go down. Right? Blah, blah, blah. Skip. Then it says, how has Japan, a country, it should be country, that has resisted global rules for its domestic markets for many years responded to globalization? Okay, so Japan is a country that has tried to fight against, tried to resist global rules as they affect the domestic market. Inside Japan, we don't want international rules. That's bad for us. So they've tried to resist for many years. How has Japan responded to globalization? According to the book authors, Japan has attempted to manage globalization by controlling both the speed and reach. Okay? We're managing globalization by controlling the speed, how fast it comes. For example, the rules should start 1995. Let's push it back to 1998. We'll control the speed of globalization and the reach, how wide it goes, who is included, who is not. Let's control the speed and the reach, how global rules and global markets affect domestic players, the people in our country. the companies, the consumer, the customers, the citizens. Smaller businesses that work with bigger businesses, maybe politicians. So, how these international rules affect us, let's try to manage that somehow. Then he talks more about some of the other factors that are affecting Japan's political economy, such as declining industries, overall financial problems, financial deregulation, privatization, administrative reform. There's lots of things that are affecting the government and affecting society. Skip some of this down for my talk. Basically, the key theme of this book, as this reviewer describes it, is permeable insulation. What is insulation? Insulation is the material we use to block. Example, it's cold outside, our heater is on in the house. I don't want my heat to go outside. I don't want the cold to come inside. So I have some material inside the wall or on the wall that will help block the temperature change. Maybe on my cup I have a foam insulation, or I buy a thermos cup so the hot inside doesn't burn my hand. I buy an ice box, foam ice box, when I go on a picnic so the cold stays inside, the hot doesn't come in. Right? I get the clear bubble and I put it on my window because the air in the bubble, the air inside the bubble is a kind of insulation to block the heat moving. Well, permeable means can go through, but not so well, not so fast. So let me give you an example. Over here, I have a coffee filter. A coffee filter is permeable. It's permeable because the coffee bean cannot go through, but water can go through, and the juices from the coffee can go through. It's designed to allow some things to go through, but not other things. With coffee, it's a filter. And if my coffee is very, very, very fine, I grind it and grind it and grind it, then I need a very fine filter, or else the coffee will come through. It'll be too permeable. But if the coffee is in very big pieces, then I could have a loose filter and it still works. So permeable allows things to go through. Here he says, permeable insulation describes policies that have at their core, at their center, at their primary reason, trying to protect domestic interests, continuing to protect those interests. Okay? We're trying to fight, we're trying to face, we're trying to deal with a shifting comparative advantage. Let's look at an example in Korea. If you go to the store to buy 5 kilos of rice, 10 kilos of rice, how much rice you want, you will discover it's much more expensive in Korea than it is in US. US rice is much cheaper. Why? Because Korea has established a system to protect Korean farmers. If you can find Chinese rice or Thailand rice in Korea, you will see that it's much, much cheaper than Korean rice. And it is legally available in Korea. Because of the trade agreements and other arrangements, Korea had to agree to allow foreign rice into Korea. So how can we fight that? We want to protect Korean farmers. Please, please, my wife's family are rice farmers. Actually, not anymore. We're all too old. Rice is too hard. So we don't grow rice anymore. Other things. We in Korea have this kind of permeable insulation in that technically, legally, officially, Chinese rice and Thai rice can come in. But practically, the government buys almost everything. Why does the government buy it? Well, the government is buying it to protect Korean rice farmers. And what they do is they buy the rice and then they donate it to poor people, hungry people in other countries. So, for example, there is famine in Africa. We send them rice. But the rice came from China. This is a way to protect the local economy. But if you look really hard, you can find Chinese rice. And if you go to certain restaurants, actually everywhere now, the restaurants, they always tell you the country of origin, you know? Do you want to buy Gugnesan Deji when you're buying your Deji Gukbap? Or do you want your pork to come from China? Well, yeah. If you're going to buy pineapple, do you want a Jeju or Koje pineapple? Or do you want a Philippine pineapple? Now, bananas, on the other hand, they really don't grow bananas in Korea. Almost nothing. So there's no reason to protect that industry. So you go to the store, almost all bananas come from the Philippines. And they could be really cheap, depending on the season, right? So bananas, there's no reason to protect that industry because there's nothing happening in Korea. So let them in. With pineapples, we're going to be a little more careful because we do grow pineapples in Korea. And rice, wow, rice farmers are really important. We really have to protect that. So that's the idea of a permeable insulation. They suggest that permeable insulation means that Japan's response, how Japan deals with these global challenges and domestic challenges, is not retreat, not denial. Oh, okay, we lose. Or no, that doesn't happen. But on the other hand, they also don't just say, okay, global rules. Instead, we create our own system that meets our needs. It permits entry and market competition in areas that's best for the existing players. All right? Bananas, fine. And protecting in less competitive areas. So, cell phones. You can buy Huawei cell phone and other brands in Korea because it's safe, right? The Samsung, LG, well, LG may be closing their business, right? But they're not worried about the competition. How many people are going to buy the, the Swedish phone, Nokia, Motorola? Hello, Moto. Anybody buying Motorola phones now? No, they still make phones. They don't sell in Korea. Legally, they can sell, but everybody buys Samsung or iPhone. So, don't need protection. Same with electronics, especially cheap electronics. You know, go to Hi-Mart. You can buy cheap Chinese heaters and fans, or you can buy Samsung. So the market is open there because the market can handle it. So in a sense, permeable permeable insulation is something like managed competition. But this insulation's not absolute, it's not perfect, but allows for differentiation. So in one industry, we allow more flexibility, in one industry, we allow less. All right? That's the kind of thing we're talking about. Later in the book, Shade talks about how deregulation has not led to liberalized markets. Well, why not? Well, because basically we have changed the regulation from government making rules to businesses making rules. Trade associations have taken over the regulatory function. So groups of businesses in the same industry get together and say, okay, we agree to do this, we agree to not do that. This is tough because in many countries, these kinds of trade associations could be illegal. It depends what they're doing. If they're fixing prices, that's illegal. But if they're agreeing to, for example, we're not going to buy Chinese electronics. We've decided no more Chinese electronics. You can buy it from Vietnam, Thailand, whatever, but no more Chinese products. That might be legal. Self-regulation works in two ways. Administrative, which means just making rules inside our business, inside our industry, or protective regulation, entry barriers, boycotts, and price restrictions. Boycott, we're not going to buy Chinese products. Industries that organize themselves may be kind of, the government might say, oh, that's good, that's fine, we don't have to worry about you anymore. Okay. So businesses can decide, do we want to protect ourselves, do we want to promote ourselves, how do we want to do? Government could say, oh, that's great, that's fine. And that's a kind of permeable insulation. In the final chapter of the book, Shade and Grimes outline, they quickly go through some of the long-term effects. Okay, now they talk about the political side, and they mention things like, well, is government getting weaker? If the legislature, the Kukihui, is getting stronger, the bureaucrats are getting weaker. What about business? What about citizens? Not going to worry too much about that. Now they change their focus. The reviewer stops with the beginning, middle, end approach, and he focuses on the theme, tema, the key points. Goes back to the idea of permeable insulation, but treats it a different way. Now he's looking at it in terms of how the scholars think about it. He says there were two schools of thought, two schools of change forecast. Here, school of thought, school means not Hakkyo, but it means group of people who share the same idea. So, for example, the people who are pro-Japan and the people who are anti-Japan could be two schools of thought. That's a little bit too wide. So, the first school of thought, the first approach to Japan is that Japan is not really changing at the core, at the center, the true heart. Japan's not changing. It's still being protectionist. It's still doing industrial promotion. It's protecting its system. The second group says if Japan wants to come back on top, Japan will have to completely reform. Now remember, in the 1980s and 1990s, Japan was top of the game. You want to buy a nice car? Honda, Toyota, maybe Nissan. Want to buy nice TV? Sony. You want to buy nice air conditioner or household electronics? Probably Toshiba, Panasonic, National. Everybody knew they were the best. They made good stuff and it wasn't too expensive. But by the time we got to the middle 90s, late 90s, Japan was no longer seen as the best and it was too expensive. And that was when Korea started climbing. Now in the year 1996, Samsung didn't make the best phones. Samsung didn't make the best TVs. Still, Japan was rated number one. But Korea was certainly climbing, Japan was certainly falling. So we had this. Oh, I gotta get in front of the camera here. Japan is falling, Korea is climbing, they're getting closer. So we had these two schools of thought. Japan's not changing or Japan has to change. But the authors, Shade and Grimes, suggested there's a third possibility. It's not just A and B. There could be something more in the middle. A third view. Japan is changing significantly. But the people who are A's or B's can't see it. They're misinterpreting it. But there is a third choice. And that brings up a problem. The problem is, how do we define, how do we understand the word change and the word reform? The reviewer says when people are talking about Japan, people who are looking at Japan, these observers, often use these two words interchangeably. They act like change and reform are the same. But this reviewer says they shouldn't do that. They're different. Japan is certainly changing, and it has always changed. It might be reforming. Not sure about that. But if it is, it's probably changing along Japanese lines. It's changing according to Japanese rules, Japanese goals, Japanese plans. For some people, change suggests that Japan should be changing following the neoliberal Anglo-American agenda. Okay, Neo-Liberalism is an economic concept that first kind of got started after World War II, but really took off in the 1970s, 1980s. It's what we think of with globalization. Neoliberal, basically the market should have freedom to do. Government should pretty much stay out of the way. And because that idea came out from American and British scholars, and the governments in the US and UK really pushed it, it's often considered an Anglo-American approach, Anglo-American idea. Nowadays, the EU, the World Bank, these are very much still neoliberal organizations now. But the reviewer says, after reading Japan's Managed Globalization, this book, he thinks Japan's core economic nationalism is not fundamentally altered. In the heart of Japan, this idea that our economy, our people, our nation is the most important, it hasn't changed. So regardless of different changes in the economy, many of Japan's product markets remain difficult to enter, difficult to crack. So as of 2001, there's still little evidence of a comprehensive opening of the economy. All right, so that's Japan. All right, I'm going to close that article and pop back here. We talked about reluctant. I'm going to review very quickly what we saw. Talking about the idea of Japan Inc., where business is the first priority for society, for government. Talked about permeable insulation, the idea that we're making this kind of protection, filter, a block, the outside and the inside. But it's permeable. We can let things through that we like a coffee filter. Talked a little bit about trade associations and self-regulation. Here's another example of trade association. Imagine the downtown area is not too busy, and we're coming to Christmas, and the shops downtown want more people to shop in downtown. Well, what do? They get together and they say, hey, everybody decorate your store, and everybody donate 1% of 1 week's income. We're going to decorate the street. We're going to pay for Santa Claus to come. We're going to play pop music or Christmas music. So all the businesses agree to work together to improve the business conditions. More people will come downtown to see Santa Claus and to see all the Christmas decorations, and they'll shop. That's a trade association. But that one is a geographic trade association. We could do the same thing with all the small businesses that are involved in making parts for cell phones. They make an association and say, okay, we're going to try to protect ourselves. We're going to fight Samsung and LG. We're going to share information about the best way to hire foreign workers to do work, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that Japan is all about coordinated capitalism. That is, the government or trade associations are organizing things. Instead of a free market, we're going to try to control or manage how our economy works. And that concept is based on this unchangeable approach of economic nationalism, that Japan has to take care of Japan economically. Finally, that any reform in the Japanese marketplace, in Japan's economic society, is going to happen the Japanese way, following Japanese lines. And here I would say that's kind of the idea of Seigehwa is Korean globalization. It's not the world's globalization. So that's a similarity. Now, we're going to stop, take a quick break, come back. I'm going to stop the recording just for safety. All right? So I'll see you in a couple of minutes when you come back. Control that tab.